Hello, everyone. My name is H. Melt, and I am from Women and Children First Bookstore in Chicago. Um, I'm delighted to be here this evening. Before we get into tonight's event, I'd like to acknowledge the land where Women and Children First sits is the unceded homelands of the Council of the Three Fires. There are over 75,000 Indigenous people of many nations living in Illinois, and we encourage you to research whose land you're on in your own communities and support Indigenous-led organizations, authors, and activists. Thank you so much for joining us for this virtual event to celebrate Aimee Nezhukumatathil's new book, Bite by Bite, Nourishments and Jamborees. I'll also mention that her best-selling book, World of Wonders, is newly out in paperback, and they make fantastic companions. Joining her this evening for a conversation about the book is fellow poet and essayist Ross Gay. The book features one chapter about their friendship, and they also have a delightful chapbook together called Lace and Pyrite. Tonight, we'll have a reading followed by a conversation and question and answer. You can add your questions to the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen anytime during the event. We, of course, have books for sale through our website, womenandchildrenfirst.com, and ship all across the country. I will drop the link to Bite by Bite throughout the evening in the chat. I'm going to say a few words about the book, read everyone's bios, and then I'll hand it over to Aimee and Ross. I always say that poets make the best prose writers, and Aimee is yet another example of this. Her writing is truly nourishing, mixing personal stories with observations about the environment and world around us. She's one of the writers I often recommend when people are in need of comfort, searching for tenderness and for truth. I'm so excited to celebrate Bite by Bite with these two giants of joy tonight. Ross Gay is the author of 4 books of poetry: Against Which, Bringing the Shovel Down, Beholding, winner of the PEN American Literary Gene Stein Award, and Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude, winner of the 2015 National Book Critics Circle Award and the 2016 Kingsley Tufts Poetry Award. In addition to his poetry, Ross has released 3 collections of essays: The Book of Delights in 2019, which was a New York Times bestseller, Inciting Joy, which was released in 2022, and his newest collection is The Book of More Delights, which came out in September of 2023. Aimee Nezhukumatathil is the author of the New York Times bestselling illustrated collection of nature essays, World of Wonders, chosen as Barnes & Noble's Book of the Year and as a finalist for the Kirkus Prize. She has published 4 award-winning poetry collections and is the poetry editor for Sierra Magazine, the storytelling branch of the Sierra Club. She lives in Oxford, Mississippi with her family and is a professor of English and creative writing in the University of Mississippi's MFA program. Thank you so much, everyone, and enjoy the evening.
Hey, everybody. I am so glad that you're here joining us. I think what I'll do is, because this is so brand new and I'm still getting my bearings on reading from this book. I compose reading out loud, I revise reading out loud, but reading in front of an audience, even a virtual one, is still pretty new. I mean, just really a week old. So I'm going to read a selection from Bite by Bite, and I think I'm gonna go with Miracle Fruit. I had bear with me. I don't know the table of contents all that well, and I still had a Post-it, and that Post-it fell out. Here we go. I'm gonna read. This is kind of an homage to my very first book of poetry, which is called Miracle Fruit. And this is kind of just expanding on that initial nugget. That's the title poem from that first collection was Miracle Fruit. And I decided to kind of expand, put all the things that I wanted to put in the poem, and it just didn't have a place for it. And I wanted this collection, just a quick note, because um, I know that not everybody is familiar with this book. This is 41 chapters of very short essays on food and ingredients that have shaped me. And I didn't want this to be one of those books that talks about how my life was nothing until I had kids, or I really am annoyed with my husband who's incompetent in the kitchen, or my kids are great, but I really wish I was writing. I just wanted this to be an ode to kind of all parts of me. So the part of me that is a daughter, the part of me that is that that holds my friendships so dear to me, the part of me that holds my kids so dear to me. I have two boys, teens now, and someone who's a wife as well, and many other hats that I wear. And this one, the chapter on miracle fruit, is kind of my ode to that rush and joy of being single in the city. And I'm actually coming to you live, in case you're wondering about the weird background. I'm basically just outside of Times Square, in New York City. So I thought this would be this. I'm getting all up in the fields, as my students say, and this takes place in New York City as well. Once upon a time, miracle fruit. Once upon a time, I was considered ancient, almost 30 and not married. So old, too picky, I heard Auntie say in the kitchen. Something must be wrong with her, the oldest grandchild and still not married, always reading. But I had a job, tenure track, and I was good at it. Turns out students love professors who are 26 and genuinely care about them. I worked and saved and bought my own house. I could take care of the yard all by myself in scorching heat, wind, rain, and snow. My father introduced me to miracle fruit a few years earlier, in the late 90s. He bought his first shrub from a roadside stand in rural Florida, and when he was excitingly explaining it on the phone, I have to admit, I still didn't quite believe him. Okay, Dad. Sure, Dad. You eat this berry, and anything you eat becomes sweet? I was more dubious because he said he hadn't yet tried it, as the shrub hadn't even fruited, and only some had flowers on it, or only some branches had flowers on it when he bought it. I just assumed he got tricked or something was lost in the translation from the man he purchased it from. Now, I taught to my parents pretty often, almost daily, and though they never said it, I think they were pretty worried about me, all alone in my blue dollhouse, they called it, with no plans to share it with anyone or anything. How about a bird like Chico? Their cockatiel. A bird will notice when you're gone. You have to practice taking care of something, Aimee. Sige na. But I was in no hurry. I was taking care of myself. I dated plenty during my undergrad and graduate school years, and though I didn't have the words to explain it, it felt so good, if a little too quiet some days, to have a place of my own, a writing room of my own, and no need to trudge out into icy parking lots anymore with my laundry basket. That was the dream. I was living the dream. So months later, when a friend in New York City called to tell me of a miracle fruit party happening in a few weeks, I didn't even hesitate. With nothing to hold me down on the weekends, I hopped a plane, I hopped a plane to see what the sweet fuss was all about. Now, in the early 2000s, the miracle fruit berry started making headlines with its novel after effects. People were having flavor tripping parties in homes, restaurants, and rooftop hangouts. I wanted to mention here too, in the early 2000s, I lived in Buffalo, New York, and you could fly to New York City. You could be in LaGuardia in 45 minutes for like $80 round trip. It was amazing. Can't do that anymore. The cardinal red berry of the miracle fruit plant is about the size of a coffee bean. It's native to tropical West Africa, and this unusual berry contains a protein called miraculin that was first isolated by Kenzo Kurihara, a Japanese scientist, in 1968. His report showed how miraculin alters the taste receptors in the tongue. After eating this berry for about 30 minutes, everything you eat becomes sweet. A lemon is as sweet as an orange. A saltine cracker tastes like a cookie. The miracle fruit party I went to was in the back room of a restaurant long since shuttered. I don't even remember the name of it, but the walls and maybe the lighting was red, the napkins were red, and there was a giant painting of a bull above the bar. Now, there are suggested foods for flavor tripping, but the ones we were served at the restaurant were pickles, carrots, goat cheese, Guinness beer, rings of fresh red onion, limes, and salt and vinegar chips. The host from the restaurant instructed us to take a single fruit and chew it slowly, mashing it up and letting the berry juice coat your whole mouth for about a minute. Then the fun began. All of us, about a dozen pals, began sampling each one of the courses. Some noticed no changes at all with some of the foods. Some had brighter reactions to most everything, but kept relatively calm. Some of us, I won't say who, had wild, over-the-top reactions to every ingredient suddenly turning honeyed in their mouths, until the Guinness. That was saved for last, and our host kept hyping it up through the meal. It's a dessert, you'll see, you'll see. Everyone says it tastes like a chocolate milkshake. And even though our taste buds were clearly temporarily altered that evening, the beer was what we all cast our biggest doubts on. We were each given another miracle fruit before we were served a pint of Guinness, perhaps to make sure the effect would be ever fresh, since the taste bud switcheroo only lasts about a half an hour. And after we were all served beer, we clinked glasses and cheered one another. I remember everyone's skin looked fuchsia, and we all seemed to be wearing clothes in shades of pink, but still gorgeous from the glow of red light bulbs in each sconce dotting the walls. All of us laughing, eyes sparkling, like we were all getting away with consuming a most delicious nectar, each such a sweet riot of joy. It felt illegal somehow. The host was right after all. If my eyes were closed, I'd have sworn the pint glass was filled with a creamy chocolate milkshake. I don't like to always admit it, but it turns out my dad was right all along about this fruit, as he is about most things in my life. None of us at that flavor tripping party were partnered up. But we were oohing and eyeing all night long, studying one another's faces, and oh, that was the time none of us had cell phones yet. I think a couple of us had a clunky something called a track phone that required a refillable card for emergencies. We were just talking, hooting and guffawing nonstop, and thought each dish brought out exclamations of incredulity, the goat cheese was more like a cheesecake. That party itself was glorious. Those few years of being single was glorious. All night we twisted our mouths into something ambrosial, delightful, and tender. I think we all knew it was fleeting as we wrapped our scarves across our mouths. My friend Chris had just started hanging out with a guy who would soon be his husband. And I had a letter waiting for me at home from a cute writer named Dustin. My friends and I huddled on the corner trying to hail a taxi, and some of us shuffled up the street to catch the train. But that evening was one of those magical New York City nights full of friends and good food. Our taste buds were tingly, mostly back to normal by the time our last group got their taxi, but I couldn't help but feel that for that evening at least, everything was still sweet. I'm going to end there. So that's a sample from Bite by Bite.
Well done. That's beautiful.
Thank you, Ross. Good to see
Lovely.
you.
Yeah,
Thank
good
you
to
so
see
much for
you.
joining me.
Absolutely. How are you doing?
I'm doing good now that I don't have, I had some technical difficulties here in Times Square. Turns out when you're in basically one of the centers of technology on the planet, technology doesn't always go your way. So who knew that my sleepy little town in Mississippi had more reliable internet? So I apologize to those waiting a little bit longer.
Well, that was beautiful reading, and the book's beautiful. And I have a few questions, and maybe we could just like talk a little bit about the
Great,
book.
great.
One of the things, there is this question that maybe I'm just going to float, and then maybe I'll ask you.
Great, good.
But one of the questions is like, what what are foods that are not included in this book? Of course, because there's only, what'd you say, 41 chapters, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And there's other things, but just hold that, and maybe that'll be
Yeah,
something that you digress into.
sure.
But more a question I was kind of curious to hear you talk about as I was reading through the book again. I was thinking, oh, these compared to World of Wonders, these are shorter essays mostly, and they're sort of like it just made me wonder about this book and its relationship to poems. And some of the essays actually have poems inside of them.
Hmm.
And I don't know if you have like I'd just be curious to hear you, wander around in that question a little bit, like what it means to go from three books of poems. I think it was three before World of Wonders, four before World of Wonders, and then World of Wonders, and then this. And is this like a move back, or is it just like that the shorter form just felt, yeah.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I mean, it's no secret, I don't think. I think last time we were together in Minnesota, I told you I'm working on poems, and it's in the writing of this book, poems just kept bubbling out, and I was like, stop, like go back, go back to where you came from for a minute, and then I just stopped fighting it. And so some of my own poems were in there, things that I ended up keeping in prose, but kind of started as poems are in there. So I think this is kind of the universe is a way of me tilting back towards the next thing I'm working on. The thing I'm working on now is poems. So, but I think it's such a lovely question because poems are always close to me, I think, and um, it's kind of how I think. So because you're one of my first readers, is that it's it's not as natural to me to think in essay form. Um, Poems are kind of my heartbeat. That's how I think in kind of leaping lines of memory, leaping sensory details. And then, at least in my essays, I actually, I have to have a narrative at some point, or at least sometimes I need to have a narrative. So I kind of miss having that lyric register. So but I also didn't try to fight it here too. And so the times where I literally break out into poetry is because I could not find sentences that worked, but I could find the break and the pause and all the delicious things I love about poems. It just served it better. So I mean, I've kind of long past classifying anything. This is definitely prose, but yeah, I mean, I think any careful reader will see, oh, that line reads like a poem, basically, that kind of thing. Or this essay reads like a poem.
I
Yeah.
love that answer because it sort of, without asking the question that we both get asked quite a bit, which is like, how do you choose a poem or an essay? You kind of actually alluded to the mysteriousness of that
Yeah.
decision.
Mm-hmm.
Another question I have for you is, there are essays like the sugarcane essay where there's a kind of history, there's a kind of um, whatever the word is, a kind of like a bio, you're teaching, you're doing a kind of like history of the plant, like what the plant does, this and that. There's a handful of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are like the miracle fruit that are really a kind of narrative. They talk about the fruit, they talk about the experience. Um, and usually they all do a little bit of both, but sometimes some really favor the one or the other. And I'm
Yeah.
just curious about if you could talk about that.
Yeah, I love those two examples, but probably the one that that kind of maybe that would answer it as a better example for that lovely question is something like vanilla, which is now my new kind of favorite spice. I have a new appreciation for it after kind of learning so much about it. I always kind of loved it. I love that it was our only spice from an orchid. But I didn't realize like how closely tied it is to climate change in particular. Like there's, without going too much into it, if, basically the gist of it is if the tropical conditions aren't right, and if if corporations keep cutting away the forest canopy where this orchid grows, it needs that dappled hot but dappled light, that kind of thing. It won't grow in bright sun. And so when there's no trees around it to give it shade, we risk losing it. And it's the only spice that food scientists haven't been able to recreate satisfactorily. And so that is, try. Anything, if you have, like I have it in the back of my pantry, imitation vanilla, it's kind of funny. It's the only spice that says imitation in big letters, because there's just, if you've ever had the actual real deal vanilla, it doesn't even come close. It's actually so sad that for many years I thought that was basically vanilla, anyway, but the gist of it is turns out I can't, that kind of started just making the sweet memory of the first time I was able to make gifts for my friends with my son, who was in kindergarten at the time. Turns out I can't talk about that in ways where I just focus on the narrative of having a son. We were warm and cozy during a blizzard. I can't not mention the fact that we have vanilla in the first place because of a boy, about a 12, 13-year-old boy, who was the person who discovered how to hand pollinate them, and this boy was enslaved. And, as is most things during that time, some white dude tried to take credit for it. And, the bar is so low, but the enslaved, Edward Albius is his name. I want to give name to him. The person who enslaved him, the bar is so low, but the one thing he did was actually, he put it in his will to say, I want it to be known that Edward Albius is the one who discovered how to hand pollinate vanilla, not his best friend, who was a white scientist who was trying to take credit. So it was amazing that was one of the rare instances where credit was given actually to the Black child who discovered it. And I just, once you know that, I can't not talk about that, especially if I'm talking about my own child. Anyway, so it kind of, I don't have some set formula at all. For example, I know you didn't ask this, but I didn't sit down to be like, I'm going to give the history of vanilla, it really was, I was following the image of my then 5-year-old son, stripping, like learning how to slice a vanilla bean and extract the little seeds out, that kind of thing. And then I felt a catch in my breath. I remembered the story of Edmund Albius, and it took a turn, that kind of thing. So that's like the behind the scenes of that particular essay, but it doesn't, I also conversely thought that I'd be talking more about the science of the miraculous enzyme, that changes the tongue for miracle fruit, and I did a paragraph for that.
Yeah.
Everything else, I wanted to kind of capture that joy, that exquisite joy of being in New York City and just like having this kind of silly party. And we were all in our 20s and just dumb and like spending money, something like that to change our taste buds, and it was just so fun to be able to go back to my sleepy town. When they asked, what'd you do? I was like, oh, I was at a miracle fruit party in New York City,
It's so fun.
Yeah. I don't know if that answered your question
Yeah,
exactly.
it totally does. And it's a great kind of longer question, I think, too, because what I think is so neat and interesting about it is that some essays lead you toward that particular kind of historical thing. Some essays lead you to a more botanical or biological history. Some essays lead you directly to your folks. Some essays, it's friends. And but yeah, I love that answer. And I guess also maybe another question is like, how did it go from World of Wonders to to this? What prompted that?
The pandemic prompted that, basically. I started thinking about what I missed so much, and that was kind of gatherings around our table. That's the number one answer. I mean, it was, we would have these gatherings in our driveway, but it wasn't the same. We didn't share a table anymore. And at the time, when I first started, I didn't know when we'd be able to share a table together. I mean, things were that spooky still. We're talking, August of 2020, that kind of thing. And so I just was thinking about all the times that I dined with people from my whole life, from young elementary school to that day, that kind of thing. And that was really, so it went from wonders to what nourishes us, but also what doesn't, and I just it was easy to be like, oh, that's not nearly as satisfying. I mean, it's kind of obvious, but there was a point in my life when if I wanted to get tomatoes, I'd go to the grocery store. That's not even on my radar right now, at least during summer growing season. Like I would sooner, I mean, oh my gosh, I'd sooner go without tomatoes than buy a tomato at a grocery store in summer in Mississippi. Are you kidding me? No. I don't know. It was it's like 41 odes to, again, moments in my life where I felt nourished when someone was nourishing me or when I was nourishing somebody else, and vice versa, that kind of thing. So that absolutely was born. I hate calling it a pandemic project at all because I mean, I was working on this till just late last year, doing the final edits this year. But it was at least the starting point was really from thinking about all the times I was sitting around the table or various areas of the world, eating with people, with my beloveds.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I am going to read one question from the audience. I think it's a.
Oh, sure.
But also, actually, I want to ask this other one first. Sorry. We'll get to this.
Sorry.
I am curious about, because you talked about growing tomatoes in the garden.
Yeah.
Kind of newly, as I recall. Like it's growing tomatoes is, I think the essay said that you kind of knew at growing tomatoes in the garden. Is that right?
I mean, new in
Did you grow them in New York?
Yeah, I grew them in New York, but they were containers. Mississippi's the first time we had them in a yard and stuff like that. Yeah.
So are you growing something new or are you expecting to grow something new and miraculous? What do I'm just asking about this garden. What's going to happen this year? What did you put in that you're kind of freaking out?
Interesting. While I was gone, this is I've been on I just finished week 1 of this tour and stuff like that. While I was gone, they conspired against me. I was kind of a little annoyed, kind of relieved in some way. Not a little relieved, but actually, let's be honest, kind of annoyed. My mom and my husband went ahead and planted all my the tomatoes that I wanted. And they're black. I should know this. The name is Black.
Is it a cherry tomato?
Is it? Oh, no. It's a slicing tomato, but what's the variety? We started them, little, and they were getting so big. What is it's 2 words. The first one is black. They're like dark purple. So they're all dark purple tomatoes. So we'll see. I have cherries and stuff like that, but the ones I wanted to plant myself because I raised these babies from, seedlings. Why am I blanking on the name? I want to say black vanilla, but that's not right. They look like a deep purple tomato. And that happened last week while I was gone. Black Beauty. Yes, that's it. Who someone mentioned that. I think it's Black Beauty. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, good.
So that's new. That's never been in my Mississippi garden before.
Yeah.
But we just got this beautiful, at the native plant, this sweet spire shrub that is so just fragrant and beautiful. I don't know if you know sweet spire. It's pollinators love it. I don't know how to explain it. The flowers are white and they're cylindrical, but they fold over like a little white fox's tail. So it's cute. It's not really like blooms with petals, but they're a bunch of tiny flowers that look like little thin baby foxtails all over. So that's new also. That's a new addition.
Yeah.
All of these were planted without me, so I'm a little annoyed.
You'll be back.
I'll be back in a week and I'll see what's what. They're at least in the good spot. I shouldn't be too annoyed because I know my husband will be like, well, I can unplant them if you'd like. He and my mom did a lot of backbreaking labor to get them all in, but that's kind of the good stuff. That's the, and now it's all rainy and stuff like that, but I'll be back to puttering in the garden in about a week.
Yeah, that's great.
What about you? What's a new addition in your garden? I always love hearing that.
This year we grew, I think, well, we planted them probably 2 years ago, but they're called honeyberries. And it's a honeysuckle family, and it makes a fruit, like kind of a blueberry-like fruit.
Oh, interesting. I don't know that.
Pretty amazing.
I love those of you in the audience. Ross has this, of course, this amazing garden, but I am still determined to get a cattle fencing arch.
Yeah,
because that is the sturdiest thing. We had like a tornado warning last week, and some of our like little trellises just blew over, and that thing that you have in your garden looks like it's just in. It looks so sturdy and stuff like that, but cattle fencing, I need to make a special trip out.
I could consult. Here's a question. What are you most excited for readers to experience when they read Bite by Bite? You have so much zest and enthusiasm for sharing about these stories, and I wonder which of these essays elicited that reaction from you while you were writing.
Well, I don't know I hope the readers will love it too. I just loved, this is one that was heavy on the research. A lot of the stuff is kind of stuff that I knew or just needed to kind of verify to make sure this was going to be, quadruple fact check. So I wanted to make sure I don't upset any foodies. But the one that was so exciting to write, well, two of them. One on just onions in particular. I learned I've been saying it wrong. I don't know if you know this, Ross. When I had to do the audiobook, they corrected me on this. How do you say that form that deals with the alphabet? How do you pronounce it?
Oh, abecedarian, totally.
See, that's how I say it. Apparently, it's abecedarian. Like I can't even do that with my mouth. You have to say the letters abecedarian. Right? I know. It's like I did it for the book, but I had to do about 3 or 4 takes because they could tell. I was just all my cheerful reading voice, and then I was like da 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 abecedarian. You could tell I was not. I always pronounced it abecedarian, but I did an abecedarian essay, and that was fun on the onion in particular. But the one that I was cracking up learning about all the world's versions of butter, just from antiquity to the present. I mean, just in the top 10 butters of the world, which is such a funny thing to me. I don't know. That's the butter chapter is the one that I had the most probably fun writing and reading about, that's if I had to, I'll probably have a different answer tomorrow, but today I just remember, I mean, I could feel myself smiling when I was typing it. So I hope when I was drafting it and then revising it and typing it, I draft everything longhand. So I hope you guys could feel that while you're reading it too.
I can feel a lot of smiling in these essays.
Good. Well, you know where I was like kind of making myself giggle. And but you do it too. I've seen you.
Totally.
You laugh at your own jokes.
Absolutely. More than anyone else. Here's someone asked because the webinar because we started a little late, I had a time to bring in a bouquet of lilacs, the smell of which takes me back to the scabbed knees and sunshine of childhood. What smells, if any, transport either of you to childhood?
Oh, I love that. Oh,
the garden is so much. It's so much a kind of tribute to your folks, and when you're writing about the garden, when you're writing about certain food, it's so much to your childhood, and
Yeah. I'd have to. Yeah, I mean, I think, oh yeah, that one too. I think the smell that sends me back, and I wish someone said there is a perfume of this. I don't know, but yeah, tomato leaves in particular. I could just smell tomatoes. I think there is a perfume of tomatoes, but I'm instantly 3 years old and toddling after my mom again, and trying to put all the tomatoes I could fit into the bucket of my dress or whatever. She always dressed me like a doll. So I was like just walking behind her in my little skirt, and she'd be so mad if I played green ones, on accident or just in my enthusiasm. I could just automatically, no matter, I mean, gosh, decades later, I could almost just picture that particular sun in Chicago of that particular garden. They've had several gardens since, but I could instantly be transported to their first garden when they came to the States in Chicago.
Love it. Beautiful.
What's a favorite smell from your childhood, Ross?
Well, lilies, my mother would always
Mm.
grow a couple of lilies in front of where we live. And that there's a particular lily. Oh my God. It's just when I smell it, but it
Is it
also,
pink one?
yeah, it's like a pink speckled one.
Yeah. What is it? Not tiger lily. I think it's Asiatic lilies.
Maybe.
Just fuchsia pink.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
very fragrant.
Yeah.
And it happened that our neighbors, um, where I used to live here in town, they had them. So they would actually like waft into my bedroom
Oh, lovely.
the time that they bloom. But also honeysuckle.
Mm.
Honeysuckle is like, it's just like one of the smells that totally, it was always growing around kind of, again,
Yeah.
man, that's so
Can
good.
you grow honeysuckle in Indiana?
It grows on its own just fine.
Oh.
Does it grow down there? Does it not grow?
It does, but we
Okay.
have coral honeysuckle. The other honeysuckle is like invasive, goes all over. So the one that hummingbirds like, and the one that we have in our garden is two spots of coral honeysuckle.
Is it kind of red? Is it the red one?
Yeah, it's the orange red. Yeah.
Yeah. Here's a question I love too. It's very it's lyrical. It's kind of lyrical.
Okay.
How can I take time to appreciate my entire meal in the context of my life while eating, rather than just obsessing over the flavors?
Oh my gosh, that's a whole essay in that question. Oh my goodness. I mean, I think it's kind of the advice I have for almost any writerly or kind of bigger question is there's always a way to kind of answer it this way. And I guess I would just say to start small. It's impossible to, it's just like in the question, what you said, it's impossible to just not be overwhelmed by the surface of the table where you are, or standing up, or whatever, or just who's with you, all the different ingredients that make it, who made it for you, that kind of thing. So and you can't put all of that into one poem or one essay, but you could start small with just, like maybe isolate one particular dish for that day or something, and just really maybe it's your beverage, and really just savor that. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't beat yourself up too much about it, but what actually, that's a good way to kind of springboard in the back of this book, because it was the number one thing that people, well, first of all, when in signing lines with both World of Wonders and this, people just share the greatest stories. Ross, I know you get this too, of just delights. These are delights, I'm sure. This delighted me. This delighted me. I get, these are wonders that and oftentimes it's usually a plant or an animal that brought them great joy or curiosity. Now it's been favorite meals and stuff, but in the paperback version of World of Wonder, and also in the back of Bite by Bite, are writing prompts, actually. And it's because the number one thing after sharing their favorite plant or animal or food is, Aimee, I used to write. I used to be so creative. I don't know where to begin. I took a job in finance, but I remember back in the day, I loved writing. Or there's high schoolers who are like, I can't tell my friends I like to write. I'm supposed to be in engineering or whatever, that kind of thing. So in the back, there's like 12, you don't have to show them to anybody, but in case you're wondering where to start, I gave 12 different questions that you can answer if you're 8 or 108, that kind of thing in there. So there's the elements of kind of that question in there too. How do I even begin to capture this meal? You can't is the answer. Start small.
It's great. I think we probably have time for maybe one or two more. And
Sure.
here's one. Thanks for the lovely story, Art, You Miracle Fruit. I recently innocently smile face. Picked up World of Wonders, thinking I was going to read about lovely flora and fauna and families, maybe, and was surprised gladly about the real talk about racism and being brown in America, too. And it sounds like this is a thing in this book, too, given the example of the beautiful / troubling story R.E. Vanilla. I'm wondering about your choices around this, as it might helpfully result in a broader readership for these important stories, R.E. racial injustice. Thanks again for these stories.
Oh, thank you so much. It's such a beautiful, beautiful comment and question all combined. You're absolutely right. The person who answered that, it was so purposeful. There was probably, for World of Wonders, there was about 200 or so wonders, and I whittled it down to 28. This one, there was about 60, and I whittled it down to 41. I didn't get quite so ebullient this time around. But the answer is still the same for both of them. These were not my favorite. Both World of Wonders is not my favorite plants and animals. This is not my favorite food. These were rather, all of them were designed to create as whole a life as possible at that time when I was putting the table of contents together. So, there are moments in here that I wanted to talk about, like dating the guy who would eventually become my husband. Talking about, the time when my mom didn't live with us and my dad was like having to single-handedly, like, figure out raising two precocious girls in the 80s by himself. These were stories in particular about, and him figuring out cooking, and that kind of thing. Coming from a family where men were absolutely not expected to do any sort of housework at all, and he ended up doing like the lion's share of it at the time. These were stories that I did not see growing up, frankly, and I didn't see stories of people that enjoyed each other around the table. It sounds maybe so innocent, but it's just such a weird absence. So for World of Wonders, I say I literally didn't see Asian Americans outside in any book, like just standing around. The only time I saw an Asian American outside, and it was Asian outside, was like a ninja. And I can't, like, that's not, I mean, I don't know. I think my younger sister like aspired to do some kicks, but that was nothing on my end. And so it was so strange. I know there's Asian American. I mean, I lived in Chicago. We lived near in the community of so many Latinos in the suburbs of Arizona. But it was so strange to see no Asian Americans outside. And in the similar vein, I didn't see the narratives I saw of Asian Americans and food was that kind of what's now becoming kind of a tired trope of like, I was embarrassed of this food and I'll get over it. I have one that leans a little in that vein, but I wanted, I say as much in the essay, this is not an essay that's ashamed. I'm not apologizing for any of my family's food ever, ever. And I want to celebrate that. So the subtitle of this book is Nourishment. So I definitely wanted to include what nourished me as a kid growing up in mostly white towns. Overall, and then also when I felt like it was a party around me, the jamboree part, again, that happiness, that joy of heaven forbid you actually want to spend time with your parents. And that wasn't always the case. Like I was a normal teen who rolled my eyes plenty at my parents for sure. But it's just weird when you see all the kind of the trauma or overcoming something or, and then none of the joy. So I wanted this book to be, again, it's not by any means saying that my family is perfect. We never fought. That's not at all what this book is or even tries to replicate. But just, I always think of my sons in the back of my mind now when I'm writing, but I think of me at age 15 when I'm writing, like what did it do to me? I don't know for sure, but what did it do to me to never see a happy Asian American family in a book eating together? It's so weird. And yet we were doing that. We were mostly happy. So it didn't make me feel strange, embarrassed a little bit, like, sorry, we were happy. I don't know. I don't have the words for it, but it definitely, when I was choosing the 41 essays, I definitely wanted it to showcase, again, a full experience, not just, oh, I was nothing, but my man saved me and I had nothing. Like, I proudly put in there that I had a car, a house, a job. My husband had nothing to do with any of that. And that is okay. That is also okay. I should not have to like make myself small and be apologizing for that or anything. And also there's moments where I definitely need my husband, you know, that for sure. So it's a big, beautiful question that's worthy of a whole nother essay, but it was in a response to what I at least was exposed to in books and movies and TV. I wanted to fill a little bit of those gaps. And by no means am I the first. I think publishing in particular has taken a different turn and now is eager for those stories. I think World of Wonder showed that this country is eager for stories from a variety of backgrounds, not just Thoreau.
Thank you. I think I just want to mind the time. So it's a
Yeah,
little bit
yeah.
after.
How are we doing on time?
Yeah, so it's just about the top of the hour. Since we started a little bit late, there's two really great questions left. Do you have time? Do you have time to maybe answer two more?
Sure. I'll try not to be so wordy on these. I want to respect everyone's time too, but yeah, go for it.
Yeah, there's one from one of your students.
Oh,
That says, "Hi, I'm one of Aimee's poetry students here. I would love to know if Aimee's landscape influenced her during the writing of Bite by Bite. If so, in what ways?"
oh, that's so great. Did the student say the name? I don't have it up.
Selah?
Sayla.
Sayla. Oh, hey, Sayla. So fantastic. Happy graduation. Um, oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I moved to Mississippi, this is now my 7th year. You could just be outside 10 out of the 12 months. That absolutely was not happening in Buffalo, New York, in Western New York. And I'm not a skier. I actually detest the cold. Summer is my total season, is when I come alive. So being in the South, absolutely. I mean, I don't think I would have included crawfish or pecans. What else did I include from the South? Even butter. Had I not had conversations with people who are very enthusiastic about those subjects in particular, very much disappointed in me that I can't really get behind crawfish. Um, and that's okay too, you know, like just because you write about food doesn't mean you love all the foods of the universe. I can find them interesting, but I don't really like, it's not my thing. I could appreciate it. I love the pomp and circumstance around it. And the South, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? So the food culture alone, and there's so many books on that. I still feel like a newbie in some ways to the South. And I just wanted to write like what I know best, which is all around the world and the country. But yeah, just being outside and being able to raise, um, just be out in the garden 10 months out of the year is fantastic. So absolutely, it helped. Yeah. What else?
And then there's a question from a teacher,
Okay.
from Stephen, that says, "As a teacher, I love that you included those prompts, and I can't wait to teach the book. I'm
Great.
curious, has thinking about food or thinking about writing about food shaped your approach to teaching or how you think of yourself as a teacher?"
That's so good. I've been kind of away from the classroom this year. I'll return back this August. So that'll be my first official test. But I do some, you know, teaching here and there um, throughout the year as a guest to various high schools and various colleges. I think the one thing that, and I don't know if it's so much writing about food as opposed to, you know, these are my travels since the pandemic, you know, I guess it feels more, and I don't know, Ross, if you feel this way too, it feels more electric in that I think people are so hungry to share stories. I think after being like alone or isolated, um I don't know, or they're more enthusiastic with me now, but they were always hungry, you know, there's always a hunger to share stories, but I think it's going to be an exciting time in the classroom where I'm not necessarily going to have to pull teeth or anything like that. I think people, these prompts are designed to facilitate discussion, and just, that's where we feel human again when we share stories. It's hard to kind of say like, oh, you don't believe exactly what I think, so I can write you off, or you could be called collateral damage on the other side of the planet. It's harder to do that when you actually know stories about each other, when you actually know, oh, the way their grandmother made this pudding is very similar to the way my grandmother makes a pudding, back in India, that kind of thing. And it's just, how do you not feel a tenderness or connection in that way when we share stories? Like, I'm always dubious when people want to silence the sharing of stories or keep us isolated in our own little cubicles, our own little screens. When we don't get to share and listen to each other, I think that's where the danger is. So I'm excited to return to the classroom in that way, to get us talking again, to get us sharing stories. I love that question. Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you, to Aimee and Ross. Thank you to everyone who is here. Please, if you don't have it yet, get Bite. If you don't get it from Women and Children First, get it from your library, get it from your local independent bookstore, get it for the wonderful writing prompts in the back. And thank you all so much for being here. It's been a joy to be able to hear and learn more about this book. Good night,
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
Good talking to you.
Thank you, Ross. Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody.